The new build of iRacing only released a few hours ago, and it's got a lot of new inclusions. There is a bunch of back-end stuff, there are new cars, new tracks, and people are calling this the best road racing update for iRacing ever. I'm going to jump in and try each new bit of content and see if it's worth buying. If you do enjoy the video, feel free to leave us a like. Otherwise, if you have any opinions, you can let us know in the comments below. The first update is that we have the new damage model added to a bunch of cars, as well as AI racing for a lot of new cars and new tracks. My personal favorite that has had AI racing added is the Gen 4 NASCAR. So you can create a custom kind of field of like a 2003 NASCAR field, and you can go racing against it if you want. It's a lot of fun. Another update that's been added to iRacing is a bunch of audio updates. The first one to talk about is an audio filtering that they have enabled. You can now make the sound coming through the game sound like you've got a helmet on, whether it's a full-face helmet or an open-face helmet, or you've got earplugs in. Games like F1 23 have actually had this in for a while now, but it's cool to see this being added to iRacing. I personally love the sound of engines, just raw, so I'm probably not going to be using it. But if you want that full immersion and you want to wear racing gloves and have a motion rig, the sound is pretty good to go along with it. Another update that's happened this build is there's been a bunch of new spotter calls added into the game. The spotter will now call out things like the strength of field, so you can see whether you're racing against a really tough field or one that you probably should be beating. And it will also give you a bunch of information about damage. It'll let you know basically how much damage you've taken, and they'll also let you know when you've taken too much damage and your race is over. So you don't have that moment of driving all the way back to pit lane, stopping, and then finding out that you have to go home. You get the news broken to you a little bit earlier. Alongside those updates, there is one update that is probably quite large, even though it doesn't seem like it. There's been a bunch of new enhancements to the back end of iRacing with the memory and CPU. So I don't fully understand computers. It seems like a rock we tricked into thinking, but basically iRacing now loads faster and it can load more cars in the game. We now have a 12 car limit for sessions. So you can load 12 different cars in a session, which means multi-class racing has more cars than ever. The first bit of new content that has been added to iRacing this build is for the oval drivers out there. It is Kern County Raceway, and it includes 4 ovals for the price of 1, which is a damn good deal if I do say so myself. So you have an asphalt oval, you have a dirt oval, and then you have a mini asphalt oval and a mini dirt oval if you're into that as well. The track looks a lot of fun. Late model racing on iRacing is actually a heap of fun. I think it's an underrated form of motorsport on iRacing. So if you're into that, it's definitely worth a buy. Another car that's been added to iRacing this build is the NASCAR Pontiac 1987. It is an old NASCAR, and it was driven by Petty Enterprises, for example. Pretty sure it came 5th in the standings that year, driven by Rusty Wallace. So it wasn't the fastest car, but it looks kind of funky, has a kind of weird looking nose. And if you're into old NASCARs, this one's worth buying. Now for the road racing side of this build, and we're going to be looking at a brand new GT3 car that was only released this year that's been added to the build. It is the Ferrari 296, and we're also going to be looking at Circuit Lebanon, which is a track in France that hosts GT racing and Formula 4 racing. It's tight and twisty, and we're going to do a lap to see how it is. So this is the Ferrari 296 GT3 at Lebanon, the brand new track in France. And first up and first impressions is quite good. So the Ferrari has actually got a bit of experience in real life. It's gone and won the Nürburgring 24 hours this year. And it's already been in ACC for a little bit. And it actually feels quite similar to the ACC version in iRacing. It's quite stable. I would say it's like a slightly more racy version of the old Ferrari in iRacing, but it's very fun, and I think it sounds a lot better as well. And this track as well, Lebanon, is honestly, it's interesting. You might be able to tell, but I'm still learning the track. It's something I've never seen in other racing games before, but it's surprisingly undulating. Feels like a kind of French version of Rudskagen almost, in a way. But the undulations are crazy, and so many blind corners like this one, which I can't see. And this is the slowest corner on the track. Yeah, interesting track. It feels like it's too short for a car like this Ferrari, but it does host GT3 racing in the real world, and apparently it's quite fun. Well, it's my final bit of the track. It's my favorite bit of the track as well. But yeah, honestly, good car. I think this car will be good in GT3 racing on iRacing. And
lap of the session.
This track will be a heap of fun in some slow speed cars like F4s and stuff as well. Next up in the build is a new car, the Super Formula SF23, as well as an update to an existing track on iRacing, Zandvoort. The Super Formula is a really cool car. I've driven it a lot in Gran Turismo 7, where there is the Honda and the Toyota, and this car is really fast. It's a fast car, it's a lot of fun, and the new Zandvoort is also pretty good as well. Let's do a lap and see how it drives. So this is the brand new version of Zandvoort and the new SF23 Super Formula car. This is the Toyota version. There is a Honda version, but in iRacing we get the Toyota one, and first impressions are very good. Honestly, this track I wasn't the biggest fan of in its previous iteration, but I think all these banked corners really make it fun to drive, especially this one. Like the scale of the banking here and how steep it feels, like it honestly doesn't come through on video until you drive it in sim. It's awesome. The only thing that's missing from this track is like the blasting house music and flares, but otherwise it's pretty great. And this car is bonkers fast. It's like faster than an F2 car, so it's pretty much the second fastest form of open wheel racing out there. And I don't know, the cars sound great. They're just really fun to drive. Another thing to note as well is that these cars have an overtake button. If you press this, overtake switches on. I don't know how it's going to work in races, how much usage you'll get, but something to be aware of. Oh. But yeah, honestly, if you like open wheel racing and iRacing, you should pick this car up straight away and race it, because participation for the next couple of weeks in this car is going to be nuts. I think everyone's going to be driving it. But then after that, who knows? But for a couple of weeks, I think this is going to be really busy.
Lap for you.
And if you've ever wanted to emulate Liam Lawson, you can get yourself a Mugen livery once somebody puts it on trading paints and race the Super Formula, which he's racing this year. And you can also pretend you got a last minute call up to Zandvoort to replace Daniel Ricciardo as well. So yeah, lots of fun. The final two new cars being added to iRacing this build are both raced in IMSA in the top level of prototype racing over there. In the LMDH class, we have the Acura ARX 06 and the Porsche 963 GTP. Both these cars are fast and they fit into the existing LMDH class, which means iRacing now has every single LMDH prototype that is racing in IMSA playable right now. It's actually a really cool thing to think of. I can't think of many other series in iRacing that has every single car of a multi-class series included. So if you're into prototype racing, it's a great time to be on iRacing. It's very cool. The first car I jumped into was the Acura, which is basically American Honda as far as I can tell. And this car it's honestly pretty great. It went on to win the 24 Hours of Daytona earlier this year before it was disqualified for reasons. But the car itself is quite fun to drive. I found it a little bit pointier than the other LMDH cars, but quite fun as well. I think it's maybe not the car I would recommend for beginners, but personally, no offense to the other Porsche that's being released, but I think it's my favorite new LMDH. The other car that's being released is the Porsche 963, and I was going to take it on a quick lap of Sebring to see how it drives. I'm at Sebring in the brand new Porsche LMDH hypercar, and I'm learning it right now. First impressions. Firstly, this track is exactly the same as it's always been, but it has 3D grass, which is very cool. I kind of like the 3D grass a lot. I remember when they did it to Willow Springs, I thought it was surprisingly great. And it looks good here as well. And this car is fun. It's got brake migration is probably my first thing to say. So it's similar in braking style to the Caddy. Feels like a little bit more manageable than, I guess, the Acura, or especially in my case, the BMW. But the car itself, I think it sounds great. I think it looks great. It does have a little bit of understeer at the moment. It might be the iRacing setups, and once the aliens get their hands on it, we may get some more pointy sets. But first impressions are, I'm battling to get the thing stopped and get the nose in. Front locking and understeer. But yeah, it sounds pretty good. It honestly sounds more like the BMW than the Caddy. It's probably my opinion on it. But it's one of only 2 cars. Oh, stay on the road. All right, don't tell anybody I broke the floor. It's one of only 2 cars in iRacing that are racing in the World Endurance Championship, along with the Caddy in the hypercar class. And yeah, it's good. There's a couple of teams running this. You've got Penske, you've got Joda. I'm pretty sure Proton as well is running this car. And if you want to pretend you're at Le Mans or in IMSA, it's definitely worth a purchase. I think this car's a little bit more stable and more forgiving than the Acura, and definitely a pickup if you want to go hypercar racing. So yeah, those are all the new cars and tracks and updates in this new build of iRacing. I think it is a great build. I think there's lots of new cars, especially if you're into GT and prototype racing. Do you like the new build? What car is your favorite or track? Do you like Kern County? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you liked the video, feel free to leave a like, and you can subscribe to OverTake more sim racing videos. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.